look, Fabrice, the Europeans have made it clear they want to rework this trade relationship going forward. But given the fact that negotiations are not really going well, do you think we get this FTA by the end of the year? At this point, we just can almost kiss it goodbye. It's just not going to happen.
Well, I think that's the point of this video conference today, is to see whether the Chinese leadership is willing to make some progress on what fundamentally is a relationship that has been stalling and degrading since the beginning of the COVID crisis. So I think this VTC is more important than just a show of engagement with the leadership. It's really to test whether Xi Jinping is willing to make some progress, especially on the EU-China investment agreement.
And what if we don't get a joint statement? Because we already hear that today, that we may come towards the end of the day, don't get a joint statement. That shows, again, negotiations are stalling. What if we don't see that progress? Can we just say, look, this is not going well. We just don't get this thing done by the end of the year. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we don't have a statement, it will be the same scenario as back in July when there was another EU-China summit, where there was no joint statement, despite the fact that the Chinese were very eager to have one. So I think if that's the case, then basically everybody's digging in for a long, difficult, I would say, rapport de force, strengths negotiation. And we have to see. But my hinge is that I think the Chinese leadership might be willing to give something to the EU. I understand there was some small progress on the investment agreement negotiations. There might be something on climate change, because the Chinese know this is where the EU really care about working with the Chinese.
So when you say they might give in something, is that, I guess, you know, the climate targets matter for the European Commission, but also the access, that penetration into the Chinese market. Do you think they're willing to budge on that? Because at this point, you could argue they get a lot of access here, but the European companies in China, where they're not really getting a fair deal. Is that what you make of it?
Yes, exactly. And that's the point of the investment agreement. It will essentially give guarantees to European firms who decide to invest in the Chinese market. And at the same time, the European Commission has released a white paper proposing a new kind of quite coercive screening mechanism on foreign subsidies. So I think that if the Chinese don't give something on the investment agreement, the European Commission will probably accelerate the pace of implementing this new screening mechanism. And they know that. So I think this is where we have to watch carefully the meaning between the lines, if there were ever to be a joint communiqué today.
Right. So I guess the ways that you're talking about this is that, if anything, retaliation from the Europeans come in the form of regulation, not the tariffs. But I'm also curious to see, you know, I do hear this idea that the Chinese engage in predatory behavior when it comes to European M&A. Is that something that you would say it's fair, this idea that the Chinese are, in fact, in some ways, almost a predatory country on Europe?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, since 2008, Chinese investment in Europe have gone tenfold, and not just in big infrastructure or oil industry, in high-tech industry. So you do see a predatory behavior by Chinese firms, often receiving directly or indirectly state subsidies. That's the heart of the matter, is if the European Commission put together a new system to screen foreign firms investing or buying things in the European internal market, receiving foreign subsidies, then the European Commission would have the right and the mechanism to stop them. That's pretty potent, and I think it's a way to create pressure on the Chinese to open up more their market.
And how about Germany? Because, you know, we've talked about this from the European perspective. We've talked about this from Brussels, but we all know that Germany is a country that's very reliant on China. They're very good at making things, but they need to also sell them. If you're Angela Merkel at this point, how worried are you about this relationship?
Well, I think Germany is of different minds on China. You have part of the German, I would say, strategic community, including the BDI, the industry association, wanting to be much tougher on China, because they have seen that over the last 20 years, there's very little access of European companies in the Chinese market. On the other hand, you have Chancellor Merkel and a few other members of her government who still believe in that relationship, who still believe that trade can actually transform China. And I think this is what you are seeing happening now with Merkel, who is going to engage today with Xi Jinping, hoping that maybe if there is enough progress, there could be indeed, before the end of the German presidency, a Leipzig summit with the 27 EU leaders and the Chinese leader.
And just very briefly, if you're Angela Merkel, do you worry more about Trump or do you worry more about the Chinese?
Well, that's the whole predicament of Europe is, where do we fit between the big power and the strongman politics? And I think that's the place that the EU is trying to carve for itself without being too aligned to the US, strong rhetoric, but without obviously embracing the Chinese way of doing business, which is at the detriment of Europe. And I think that's the big challenge that the EU is facing right now.